Hey, Blue Rev, it's Dan McCool coming to you from Brooklyn, New York. At a great coffee shop called Brooklyn Whiskers, and just wanted to say hello again, and thanks for tuning in to this week's stream for the Blue Rev Show. Today, I'm going to be interviewing, or I'll be airing an interview that I did with Scott Forman, who is the founder of Vote Forward, along with one of his colleagues at Vote Forward, and they're going to be talking about the results from the 2020 letter writing campaign that I know thousands and thousands of you were involved in last year as we won the 2020 presidential election. So I hope you enjoyed that interview. As I'm trying to do with my routine here, I like to say a little bit something about the news before we get going with an interview. And I haven't chimed in since the approval of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It was a great victory. I think that in some ways it did show that we were perhaps a little bit pessimistic about the idea of the president being able to reach across the aisle and get some of his Republican colleagues on board. Not many Republican colleagues, but some anyway, which was the whole, or not the whole, but a major reason why Biden was running, or a major staple of his candidacy when he started running in 2019, was that he could reach across the aisle. Now, we might not love some of the compromises that reaching across the aisle entails. Obviously, getting a few Republican votes did take watering down some of the provisions of this bill, but by and large, this is still a historic and generationally important bill. This is the biggest infrastructure bill that we've seen in a generation, and perhaps ever. So some of the things that are in the bill, because we want to highlight that. We don't want to just sort of blast past this and put points on the board and say good job. We want to say that this is going to actually improve the lives of real Americans. So some of the things the bill does, replacing lead water pipes, right? So a big issue the last couple of years, particularly up in Flint. But replacing lead water pipes, modernizing our ports, making high-speed internet affordable for many Americans that don't have it currently. The first ever national network of auto charging stations in America. So that's a big step forward in reducing our fossil fuels, investing more in rails, roads, bridges, public transit, more than we've ever invested before. As I said, a historical accomplishment there. Reducing supply chain bottlenecks to distribute goods to consumers faster. So of course, right now with the supply chain in a difficult state, we want to make sure that we do that. Renewable energy manufacturing, solar panels, wind turbines, power for electric vehicles, building up resilience against superstorms, droughts, wildfires, and hurricanes, and investing in climate change. So we could get into the details of this bill, and perhaps pretty soon, after it's actually signed by the president, maybe I'll bring someone on to talk about it a little bit more. But for the time being, folks, we can say that this is a major accomplishment. It's something that the previous president ran on. It was a centerpiece of his 2016 and 2020 campaigns, and he never did anything about it. He couldn't get it done. This president is going to end up getting this done, and we ought to be proud of the work that we did last year to get him elected. And speaking of the work that we did last year, as I mentioned, on today's show, on today's broadcast, we've got Scott Forman, who is the founder of Vote Forward. I know that many of you were involved in the Vote Forward program last year, the Big Send. I will be putting in the post here, whether you're watching this on YouTube or in the Facebook group, I'll put in the post some of the results from the 2020 Big Send campaign. We sent hundreds of thousands of letters here in Blue Revolution, along with a million postcards. So we did a lot of work on this Big Send campaign, and it was not really taken seriously. These vote encouragement letters were not really taken seriously by too many in the get out the vote kind of profession. And it's changing some minds, though. The results were pretty remarkable. 0.8% uptick in voting for people who got these letters last year. So we're really proud of that. We really did make a difference. And I don't know if I sort of emphasized in the interview enough, but like when you think about the number of letters we wrote, how many votes that translates into, and just how incredibly close the 2020 election ended up being, as I've repeated many times, as many people have repeated, 44,000 votes in 3 swing states was the difference in this campaign. So, the fact that we here in Blue Revolution wrote hundreds of thousands of these letters, including 1 million postcards, and then they wrote 17 million of these letters across the country is really something remarkable. So everyone just, please, if you haven't in a while, take stock of the work that you did last year. Really important stuff. So anyway, without further ado, I'm just going to hand it over to the interview that I recorded with Scott and his colleague. And you guys enjoy. We'll talk next week on the Blue Rev Show. With us today, we've got the great Scott Forman, the founder and executive director of Vote Forward. And also with us is Lauren Harmon Murphy, the senior director of partnerships with Vote Forward as well. Scott and Lauren, welcome to the Blue Rev Show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, Dan. Great to talk.
It's a real pleasure. Scott, I just wanted to begin with you and say, first of all, congratulations on all your successes in 2020, particularly the success of, I just saw that there was a Time magazine article not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, about these successes. And I just kind of wanted to dive in and ask you, Scott, how 2020 went and just sort of, tell us what we did, tell us what we accomplished. And by the way, I'll mention Blue Rev did somewhere around 400,000 letters, along with 900,000 postcards. So all the people listening to this right now, you are the folks who really helped make this happen. But anyway, Scott, take it away. Tell us about 2020.
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, I'll just start by saying +1 to what you just said, which is that all you folks who are listening and part of the Blue Rev group, you made a gigantic contribution to making all of this possible. And so we're deeply grateful for all of that. Dan, you've known and we've known for a while that the Big Send program in 2020 was big. Like, it was a huge success in terms of volume. We originally intended to send about 10 million letters, and in the end, it was more than 17 million, and then another 4 million, I think, once you include the special elections that happened after the general. But what we didn't know until pretty recently was the result of the experiment that we embedded in the program. So Vote Forward, you may remember, was begun with a randomized controlled trial, and we've maintained a commitment to doing this kind of rigorous evaluation throughout the years that we've been in existence. A few weeks ago, and some of your group members may have seen this already, but we hosted a webinar and then published some results on our website and got some press around it as well. Based on the analysis of that experiment, we think that the program that you helped power last year was one of the most effective and certainly most efficient, cost-efficient voter contact tactics ever tested in a presidential election. That's really the top line conclusion. Our best estimate is that the impact of the program was about 0.8 percentage points, so just a little bit shy of 1 percentage point, which is kind of an extraordinary number for a presidential campaign. We would have been thrilled if it were 0.2 or 0.1 even, and you may hear other programs that were around that scale, and that would have been amazing. So 0.8 is really kind of off the charts in terms of the magnitude of the impact for a presidential cycle. If you extrapolate that all out, it works out to about 126,000 net votes. And that is obviously, at least potentially, electorally significant. So the goal here was to help make sure that a lot of people turned out. And we now have pretty strong evidence that it really did accomplish that. So it's exciting, and it gives us a lot of hope for the future of the program. And we're excited for you all to continue participating in the coming years.
Incredible. So, bottom line, 126,000 more votes got out in 2020 who otherwise would not have voted.
That is the conclusion. That's the advantage of doing randomized trials, is that you can make causal claims like that. Now, obviously, there's some error bars around that, and nothing is ever certain, but that's our best estimate of the impact of the program. Yeah.
Wow, incredible. So that's just, something for folks to try to wrap their heads around. And I got to say, as someone coming from a political science background, get out the vote studies, get out the vote data is usually like, there has not traditionally historically been a lot of it. But I think that the data aspect of this is getting more and more sophisticated as we go on. And it's just so great to hear that everything that we did really did make a difference and will make a difference in the future. Lauren, I'll turn to you and ask you, given the successes of 2020, given the sort of I feel like we're getting back up off the mat after winning that election, after sort of this off year, so to speak. I mean, I know that people are doing work still in 2021, but what are y'all's plans for 2022 in Vote Forward for the midterms?
Oh, well, Dan, I'm so glad you asked. And before I dive in, let me just echo Scott's thanks to everyone at Blue Rev who really made all of this possible. It's been incredible to see. As someone who's relatively new to the Vote Forward organization, I've been on board about 2 months now. Looking back at some of this data has just been extraordinary. The engagement that we've had just across the board with our partners. So the short answer to your question is we want to do it again, but even bigger. We really think we have a path to sending at least 20 million letters for the midterm elections. And that'll be some combination of statewide campaigns and specific congressional districts. But we also want to build a bigger partner coalition. And so, if folks who are listening to this interview would be willing to spread the word to their friends that writing letters is, number one, fun, number two, easy, and number three, impactful, we would be so grateful because we could not do it without you. We want to really make this something that is plug and play, really turnkey for our partners to make sure that they're not taking on that burden of the back end work. They're focused on getting in touch with voters to tell them why voting matters. We're going to handle all of those logistical details and odds and ends so that folks can really dive into just contacting their neighbors and folks around the country about just what's at stake in the midterm elections. So the TLDR is 20 million letters. We can do it, but only with your help.
Where do you see sort of the evolution of this going towards? I mean, I think it started as kind of just like a sort of a novel idea, and it's really catching on. Like I mentioned, we've got like the Time Magazine article. There's other, tons of articles I've seen in the last few weeks written about this get out the vote tactic. And where do you see this going into the future?
So I definitely see the same thing that you do, Dan, which is that it has become more mainstream over the last couple of years. It's not totally novel. This kind of citizen to citizen active participation in our democracy is, I think, an important piece of the fabric of it for a long time. What Lauren was saying a few minutes ago, I think, is a big part of it, though, which is that the goal is to make it really easy for people. Like if you think about the history, like what you might have been asked to do in 2014 or 2012, probably would have been knocking on doors and making phone calls. And those things are still really good, just to be clear. Like we absolutely want people to do those things. But for many folks who either don't live near a congressional district or a relevant race where it's really competitive, or who are disinclined to do those things either because they can't or because they are an introvert like me or because, yes, like many of us, that's been our project, is to try to provide a very gentle on-ramp to this kind of participation that feels authentic and is effective. And I think we've succeeded at doing that. We're going to keep working on the platform to make it even easier. So we've been piloting some projects this year to lower the barrier to entry. We have historically, we've provided some people with the stamps, covering the cost of the stamps. And we're planning to continue and enlarge that program. We also recently completed a pilot where we sent people the entire kit. So like the letters themselves, the envelopes and the stamps and a pen and a sticker. And we intend to do more of that next year as well, if we can, find the funding for it. So I think definitely one dimension is just continuing to make it easy and easier. And then the other thing I would say is that I know you saw this last year. We hope it's contagious, and we have seen a lot of that. So people, our best advocates, the source of most of the new volunteers last year were other volunteers, people hosting parties, people just talking about it with their friends. I even went down to do laundry in my basement at some point last year and found a flyer on the bulletin board for Vote Forward that somebody else in my building had put up. And we want to lean into that too, because I think obviously the reason we do this is because it's effective at increasing voter turnout. I think it's also really good for us, the people who are doing the work. I certainly find that it feels good. And it feels like doing something to help maybe stitch back together what feels like a social fabric that's fraying a little bit. There's something kind of appealing about that. And we want to lean more into that part of it too. So those are some rambly thoughts, but that's kind of my inclination for the future.
Not rambly at all. I mean, you're speaking our language here. The stamp share, we did something like this last year in Blue Rev. The postcard writing parties, I think, is sort of a big part of it. You know, what I've been sort of thinking about lately is that a lot of times when you're doing political activism, especially with Get Out the Vote, you're usually talking to people who by definition are like not super amped up about politics, right? You're sort of trying to get them to go out and vote and everything. Sometimes you are, but a lot of times you aren't. And I think with these sort of like letter writing parties and get-togethers and things like that, it allows people to like continue to stay with their fellow activists, right? So in that way, it is good for us, as you said. But yeah, making things easier. Yeah, it's sort of a big part of it. There's always sort of there's a cost to voting. There's a cost to activism. We can sort of, even put these in sort of dollar numbers at the end of the day for some people. So I really appreciate, the fact that we're making this easier. Laura, did you want to add anything to this part of the discussion?
Just that I think Scott really hit the nail on the head when he was talking about the intersection of field activity with letter writing, with, some of the paid communications moments. I think we've seen more and more every single cycle that we need an all of the above strategy. We can't only rely on door knocking, which is of course critical, or phone banking or texting. We can't only rely on direct mail or digital ads or television. We need everything. And what I was so excited about when I got to dive into some of the data from 2020 and the big send was seeing that letter writing is such a critical part of that infrastructure of how we're contacting voters and just encouraging them and letting them know that someone on the other end of that envelope, the other side of that stamp, really cares about whether or not they've had an opportunity to make their voice heard. And I think we really can't discount that personal touch. And so I would just really agree with Scott that we need everything, and letter writing is one critical piece of that.
Indeed. And, we did talk about, you mentioned the all of the above strategy. I mean, I think, my sort of take on this going into the midterms is that like we've had enough experience with like, organizations like Vote Forward and postcard organizations, and texting obviously has become much more, prevalent the last few years, that, I sort of picture folks like knowing which activities they want to do and like how much percentage of their energy they want to put into each, which is really cool. Like knock on X number of doors, write X amount of letters, send X amount of texts, make X amount of calls. And, in Blue Rev, I think that we're going to sort of try to hone in on that this year, because it's not just about the effectiveness it is largely about the effectiveness of these tactics, but it's like how much energy does each person have? And what is regenerative for people, right? Like I feel like letter writing actually creates more energy rather than draining it, and in that way, I'm really excited about it. So for anyone watching still right now, like we will have the link to sign up, within Blue Rev to kind of plan to make a volunteer action in 2020 and plan your volunteer activities. And of course, part of that will be signing up with Vote Forward. So I guess I just wanted to, ask if either of you wanted to add anything else to this conversation in terms of going forward into the future, in terms of what we've already done. We just got a couple minutes left here, so I'll throw it to you guys if you want to add anything else.
Well, Scott, may I say one thing before you dive into any final thoughts, which is that something I found really intriguing is that Vote Forward has typically focused on doing some experimentation in the off years and then using the on years or the even years. We know every year is an on year these days as a building year and a year for growth. But I do want folks to know that there will be opportunities to engage in different experiments that we can still run in the even years to really try to hone and get better, and that their contributions to the letter writing program, which has already been so incredible to see what the Blue Rev members have done, they're going to help increase our learnings so that we can be getting better every single time we do this. And so that's something that I'm really trying to stress with our partners and with the folks who are engaging with us, is that Of course, writing the letters in and of themselves are valuable, but we're also learning a lot every time we run a campaign about what is working, what is not, how can we make sure that every single hour and every single letter is as effective and efficient as possible, so that we're really making the most of your time in that volunteer budget that Dan was talking about, if you will. So I think that's really cool. It's one of the reasons I wanted to be doing this work, is just this continual learning, continual improvement. So I wanted to make sure that folks knew just how valuable that is to us, and how grateful we are that you're engaging with us in this way, as you have in the past and hopefully will be in the future.
I don't have much to add to that. That was going to be my last point also, actually, is that we have done a bunch of experiments this year, and we have more planned for next year. And often, even if you are participating in a Vote Forward campaign that doesn't announce itself as a Vote Forward Labs campaign, which is the label we sometimes use for the ones that are particularly experimental, we do try to learn something from every one of them. And I think this gets back to one of your original points, Dan, which is that we do see a movement in the space towards more data-driven work, and we are very much proponents of that. And we try to inflect everything we do with that spirit, not just because it is it helps to allocate your resources as a volunteer, but also because there are real opportunities for us to continue to make this thing even more effective than it already is. And I think we hope to do a lot more of that over the coming years. So yeah, that's a good last point for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, no, it's a really great point. It's not, we've got the data, the effectiveness, it makes us feel good. And, every letter that we write, even if it doesn't necessarily get someone to vote, like it's part of the universe of data that we're collecting to try to figure out what works and what doesn't. So, every single thing we do here really does matter. So, I want to thank both Lauren Harmon Murphy and Scott Forman for joining us here today on the Blue Rev Show. You folks are saving the world, and we are honored. We really truly are honored to be a part of this this project here. And on behalf of all the members of Blue Rev, just thank you for this thing that you created. It's really quite impressive. So thank you so much, Scott and Lauren. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much. We're honored to work alongside you and all your members as well.